Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about some brand new Synology. This is following up my overview video from a day or two ago where I was talking about the information that was leaked on the latest Synologies for the end of 2020. I say the end, probably late summer to be honest, but today I want to talk about the DS720. It's that expandable, powerful 2-bay from Synology, and personally, probably my favourite of the four. It's the one that when I saw it and I was looking at the specs, I thought that is going to be interesting. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. There's lots of reasons why it could be very good, other reasons why it might be pitching a little bit too high. But today I want to go through these specs in a little bit more detail. Don't get me wrong, this is going to be based on those spec sheets. So everything I'm talking about today is of course subject to change. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward, and we certainly don't know if this newer generation of Synology is still going to arrive this year. Synology, like any other tech brand, can often juggle things around. But the the DS720 Plus, I should say, is the brand new 2-bay that will hopefully be with us in the next few months. It utilises a brand new CPU for Synology in their range of hardware, the J4125, which is an Intel Celeron 4-core based processor. Now, this CPU, arriving at 2.0 GHz per core that can be burst up to 2.7 per core, is particularly impressive. It's better than anything we've seen before in their 2-bay range. It's probably the most powerful 2-bay for a number of reasons that Synology have ever released. And it's not just about that CPU either. That CPU is still an incredible selling point for many of you, with AES-NI encryption, 4K and 1080p native transcoding, as well as 1080p transcoding with Plex Media Server. It is definitely a processor to get behind. On top of that, that CPU with its integrated graphics, and that's integrated graphics 600 HD, graphics UHD. That means that things like surveillance, it will allow you to have more cameras running synchronously in your surveillance station UI, thanks to the graphical handling of that processor. If you're going to be looking at containers or virtualization with Synology's Virtual Machine Manager, this NAS will handle VMs very well indeed. But on that last subject there, that's one of the areas in which the 720 kind of let me down a little bit. And that's to do with the memory. Because although it's using, impressive DDR4 memory at 2400 megahertz, it's worth highlighting that it arrives with 2 to 4 gig by default, which is upgradable to 6 gig, which is a weird number. I know a number of you out there are kind of put out by the whole 6 gig idea, and I've never really gotten over it personally. If I put RAM inside a device, it's either going to be one stick on its own, or I pair them exactly the same. Doing that with different, mixed modules, not so sure about that. But Synology have done this, tried and tested in the past, and their software seems to smooth over any rough patches that may or may not exist. So we can't criticize them too much for that. On top of that, with that CPU, we can look at the other hardware featured on this device. Let's save the best bit till last, shall we? First and foremost, it is a 2-LAN device. It's got two 1 GBE ports, so none of your 2.5 or 5 GBE here, which is a bit of a bugger really. I'm not a huge fan of that, but it does have USB 3 front and back. So you've got your expandable ports there that allow you to connect USB devices that are either on the compatibility list or as storage devices to work with as just external storage, or something a little bit more involved in your backup strategy with Hyper Backup. Now, on top of those USB ports, you've also got an expandability option here with an eSATA port allowing you to connect the DX517, so 5 extra bays of storage. So if you buy a 2-bay today and later on really start using your storage, add 5 bays later. And now, with Seagate's Iron Wolf series of drives arriving at 16 terabytes of capacity, you've got this 2-bay which can kickstart at 32 raw terabytes, and you can add an enormous amount of storage with that expansion device, and you can add drives gradually as you see fit. So it's a huge amount of storage potential even now. So there's a lot going for it, but probably the bit that stood out for me the most in the hardware department, let's face it, is going to be the fact that this 2-bay of hard drives also features 2 NVMe SSD bays. That's pretty cool. A number of you I know will look at that and feel that there's a bottleneck with the two 1 GBE ports, But me personally, I think NVMe SSD cache has always been about improving internal speeds. And I know you can take advantage of those speeds externally with something like 10 GBE, but me personally, NVMe is something, when it comes to caching, that I like to see the results internally, not externally. There's an argument for both, but that's just where I live on it. Now, there is another bit of a saddened point about that. You can't utilize those NVMe SSD bays for raw storage. Once again, you probably wouldn't, given that you can only get up to 2 gigabit Ethernet on this device. So the raw power and speed of NVMe SSD media is not going to be fully realized externally. But I like the idea of being able to take advantage of different media speeds comfortably. If you put 2 SSDs inside this device, you would get the combined RAID ability of 2 SSDs at your fingertips on the internal operations. And to me, it seems a bit of a waste that you've got 2 hard drive bays and 2 SSD bays and only have those SSD bays being used for cache with the huge amount of storage potential that is NVMe SSDs. So overall, I've got to say that this 2-bay is still bringing everything in terms of hardware to the table, more than its predecessors. 716 Plus 2, the 718, they were good NASs, and all of them arriving at a similar price point indicates that the 720 Plus will arrive at a similar price point. But what I would argue is that NVMe SSD caching option inside has probably resulted in a change in the chassis and particularly build quality, and this will be reflected down the line in their release prices. Right now you can pick up the existing range of expandable 2-bays, and again that includes the 718, for around £360 to £370, and I think that price tag is probably where we're going to find the 720 Plus. Maybe a pinch higher, 385, closer to 4, we'll have to see. That will ruin the nice fluid kind of release structure that Synology seem to be going for, with the 220 Plus, the 420 Plus, the 720 Plus, and the 920 Plus at the top, all being 1 GBE. Still mixed thoughts about that. But the 720 Plus is certainly going to be a great NAS in an age where hard drives are reaching, fantastically large capacities, where we no longer have to think in terms of 4 and 6 and 8 and 12 bay NASs of storage. We can get a huge amount of storage now in very, very compact NAS chassis, and we can leverage our spending towards that hardware like CPUs, like memory, like SSD caching. And that's why I think the 720 Plus for me is probably going to be the most standout one of the bunch. Now, in terms of software, unsurprisingly, this CPU is going to give you a lot. CPU benchmark rated at 3035, I think is their score. So that's hugely, its predecessor, the J3455, featured in the 918 Plus and the 718 Plus, that scored around 3300 there or thereabouts. So it's a big, big jump in terms of, CPU classification and what it brings to the table. Both the embedded graphics and the raw output power per core of that quad core means things like virtualization with the right amount of memory are going to be running here. Active backup suite and hyper backup are going to be able to run very, very fluidly internally, as well as communicating with external devices. And of course, for multimedia users, 4K and 1080p transcoding natively with their own Diskstation app is going to run beautifully. If you're a Plex Media Server user, maybe less so. You're going to have to make sure you've got a decent amount of memory off the bat, but it's worth highlighting that a Plex Media Server user, if you are looking at 4K transcoding, you should be looking at a Pentium, an i3, an i5, stuff like that. This CPU is going to transcode 1080p very well in natively, and pretty damn well as a Plex Media Server, with both encoding and decoding enabled at H.265 and H.264 decode only. Now, if you're looking at the multimedia applications outside of that, such as PhotoStation, VideoStation, and of course Synology Moments, that great AI photo recognition application, they're all going to run well here, as well as some of the other stuff that are going to be coming in DSM7. Fingers crossed this device arrives before DSM7, because I think a lot of users aren't going to want to wait until a blanket release of software update like DSM7 before a whole myriad of hardware comes to the market. But ultimately you are looking at the most powerful 2-bay that Synology have ever put out in their history. It's going to be interesting to see how it compares against the 718 in practice, and how it compares with QNAP's releases such as the 253BE and the soon-to-arrive DS253D. Lots of similar hardware, but a different attitude about what to do with it. But we'll talk about that in another video. Thank you so much for watching. Click like if you've enjoyed this video. Click subscribe if you want to learn more about these new releases as we talk about them. And of course, buy your NAS at span.com. Visit and learn about network attached storage and data storage in general at NASCompares.com. And I'll see you next time.